Well, thank you, Emily, for inviting me here today to be a part of this gathering at the Laurel Highlands Village. I appreciate it. My name is Alex Graziani. I'm the City Manager of Latrobe. I've been the City Manager here in Latrobe since August 2011. A little bit about that. You know how dog years, a dog lives a year, it's 7 years? Well, it's the opposite for a manager. I've been here about 14 or 15 months, and I feel like I only know about 2 months worth of manager stuff. So I'm not sure, this is my second budget, when I'll finally get it. But I wonder to myself, how did I get through last year's budget for how much I'm trying to ask the same questions again this year? I asked the staff, so explain to me once again what we're spending this money on. Now, mind you, all the bills come through me anyways. But there's so many of them, it's hard to keep track of where they're going. So that's one side of it. A little bit about myself personally. I'm married to Eva. We've been married for 23 years. We have 5 children. Our oldest is 23 years old, and our youngest is 7. 4 boys and a girl. I currently reside in Greensburg, which is about 11 miles away from here. It's not too far to ride my bike. And sometimes
it is far.
Yeah, sometimes on Fridays I ride my bike, and hopefully I'll be able to do it one time in November so I can say I rode my bike to Latrobe in November. But when Emily reached out for me and asked me if I'd be interested in coming over here, I most certainly am. I work for you. I work on behalf of the City Council who has hired me. They're my bosses. But ultimately my wage and salary is derived by the taxes that are paid in this town. And I'm paid to carry out the council's mission. And the mission of council and the mission of this city is the same, and that's to protect the people and property of the city of Latrobe. It's not big, it's about 2.3 square miles, it's about 8,000 people. But our job is to protect the people, you all, and the property, the buildings, the things you own, the car you drive, and so forth. That's our job, is to protect that. What I like about that is it's pretty simple. Unlike state government, which has a lot of other responsibilities, including provision of federal health care and those kinds of things, they have a lot more activities they're involved in. Education, both at the grade school levels, higher education in colleges. The national government, of course, seems to have even a larger sphere of responsibilities. For local government, it's pretty simple. We collect property and income taxes. We levy fines and fees and other kinds of costs to be able to provide protection in the form of police, fire, and public safety to the 8,000 residents in the 2.3 square miles of Latrobe. So I welcome any opportunity, like I've been given here today, to come to talk to the people of Latrobe in a two-way conversation. One is a little bit about what we do, and the other part is a little bit about, hopefully, your concerns and your cares, and help me to better understand how to do our job better. And so, whether it's this group, or Rotary, which I was at a couple weeks ago, or tonight where I'm going to the United Methodist Church to speak to another gathering, I'm most interested in these kind of opportunities. So I thank you for allowing me to be a part of your day today. Did you have a question?
Basically, when I'm out and about, I find that the curb cuts are
Inadequate.
disrepair and very inadequate. Sometimes I go around a good bit, and I've noticed a lot of them need repair, and there's places they should have them that do not have them. For instance, several times I go up to a funeral home up on Lincoln Avenue. I won't give a name, but I have to take alleys. Some of the alleys are in good shapes, better than the roads and sidewalks, and some of them are terrible.
Emily, I really appreciate that question. And believe it or not, when you hear my answer, you might think I planted the question. My oldest son is disabled. And I say that to say that he's not going to be able to drive a car. It's just his reality. So life is a little different for us than for him, a lot of other 23-year-olds. He needs to really be in a community setting where he can walk to what he needs to get to because he's not able to drive. Unfortunately, in Westmoreland County, we've not built many communities like this, that for the most part, things are nearby and at least walkable. However, we really are not done a good job of providing accommodations. Many of you maybe remember back in the Bush 1 administration, the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed. And I liken the ADA, as it's commonly called, to be this really like the civil rights legislation of the 60s. When the civil rights legislation of the 1960s was passed, it enabled minorities, particularly African Americans, opportunity to get access to things that they had been denied access to before. And in the same way, the Americans with Disabilities Act sought to overcome the barriers which kept people with needs of mobility, with hearing, with sight, and to remove those barriers so that they could participate fully in society. Unfortunately, Latrobe was built before ADA laws, and quite frankly, with no regard for the disabled, for the young, and for the old. I mean, let's face it, when you've got to cross a street and the little flashing sign that says walk gives you about 3 seconds to get across, you know, that doesn't work not only for older people, but it doesn't work for disabled people, and it certainly isn't working for a mother maybe with a stroller and another 3-year-old in tow. So we've not done a very good job. The simple things as doors. Unfortunately, even now at the City Hall, if you were to go pay your taxes, 2 of my doors I've got a big problem with. I don't feel they're as accessible as they need to be. I'd like them to be a push button or an automatic sensor, so you don't have to move a lever. It's not even, we used to have a doorknob. We did get the handle in there, but I'd like a push bar, but at the minimum, a push bar. But ideally, to provide full accommodation, we need to have some sort of sensor. The curb cuts. Not only are the curb cuts missing in many locations throughout the city, but as Emily said, they're in disrepair. Worse yet, the ones that are decent are not adequate. And I've seen for myself, people leave the high rise and, for example, go down City Hall and they're headed towards the post office, and they go out of the parking lot ramp because the ramp at the corner of Jefferson and Main Street is not wide enough for them to move through. So I know the problem. It's not good. But the reality is on the supply side of income. What we lack are really the funds to adequately address that. The federal government was great in telling everybody you need to accommodate everybody, but they made the rule, and it's a mandate that I've got to implement, but the funding isn't there to do that. So unfortunately, it has been way too slow. And here's what's going to happen. Groups who represent people with mobility challenges will begin to use the ADA Act, the Americans with Disability Act, like the civil rights groups, minorities have used the Justice Department. And they will have to organize and sue businesses in government like ours to be responsive about this issue. Because if they don't, unfortunately, it will be put in the priority of projects that exist. Potholes, parking meters, storm drainage, water, sewer, police uniforms, police cars, equipment to manage all that. It will put into that giant list of projects, and quite frankly, it won't probably get the attention it will. Imagine for a second, Main Street being closed through town. PennDOT, let's say, is doing a project. How long do you think the motorists of this town would tolerate the project, let's say, not being done, but the road being closed?
Not very long. Too long.
Okay, it's agreed it wouldn't happen very long. But we have no problem shutting down a sidewalk or limiting access for a person with disabilities or who is older, who is younger, and never really dealing with it. You know, quite frankly, the pedestrian population, which most of us fall into, isn't as well thought of as the automobile population. And drivers, you know, we don't want to hinder them. And lastly, on this issue, this is a very near and dear issue to my heart. The pedestrian has to be king in the urban environment. In Latrobe, as long as I'm manager, we're going to try to make efforts to protect people by slowing cars down.
Yes.
Automobile drivers are way too impatient to get from point A to point B, and they will not use this town as a speeding raceway. I will do everything I can to stop. I will do everything I can to stop them. I'm not interested in their convenience. They can wait to get to Walmart on Route 30. They may wait an additional minute. That's no problem for me. And it should be a problem for them. So whether it's coming through on Depot Street, Lincoln, Ligonier, Lloyd Avenue, they've got to slow down. And they've got to wait for people to get around. Because in this urban environment, in my opinion, we must have pedestrians as king within that. But it's not easy. We want to begin even here at this intersection of Main Street and Ligonier to address the four ways, the four corners, and try to get better accommodations. But what we need is a plan to identify the highest priority curb cuts and corners, and then we need to back that plan up with a long-term, a 10-year budget, a 15-year goal to eliminate all obstacles for a lady pushing a stroller or a person in a wheelchair or who needs the assistance of a walker.
Could you do like they do down in front of the high rise, where they have the, you know, all traffic has to stop when they see somebody in the crosswalk? Would that work?
That's the law of Pennsylvania everywhere. I'll say that again. The law of Pennsylvania is motorists must stop when pedestrians have addressed the road and have made intentions or are in the crosswalk. However, it only seems to occasionally be followed. In fact, the other day I had an 18-wheeler who came to a complete stop, and I only was standing on the curb.
Oh.
And I was able to walk across the street because he saw that I was addressing the street, and he stopped for me. So what she was pointing out was, again, on Jefferson Street, those signs that we've put out seem to be working sometimes for some motorists. But unfortunately, we've seen the enemy, and it's us. And I'm not particularly blaming you, but all of us, our sons, our daughters, our brothers, our sisters, the people who work for us, the people we work with, we all drive for the most part. And I know some of you don't anymore. But, you know, it's amazing we all have been pedestrians as well. And why we don't show respect. I mean, do you know that since I've been in this town, I've been passed 3 times on streets in this town, in this city. I've been passed by a motorist behind me who went into the lane, the oncoming traffic, and passed me 3 times, twice on Tacoma and once on Ligonier. Once I was in the city maintenance truck, a pickup truck. They passed us.
Can't you arrest them?
I wish. Believe me, you want to talk road rage. I wanted to go chase them down and, you know, run them off the road or something. You know, it just really makes you mad. Tacoma, and I'm not kidding you, the last time I was passed by a vehicle was on October 28th, I want to get the day right, which was Saturday, I believe. It was Halloween, and it was 5:30 or 5 o'clock, a little bit before Halloween was over. We had trick-or-treating that night from 4 to 6. I was going up Tacoma, and I was driving very slow because I didn't know when one of our little costumed characters would come out from behind a vehicle to go to another house. I was going about 20 miles an hour on Tacoma towards the hospital, and I got passed by a car. I use those examples, those 3 examples, to say all drivers have to have a real reality check about what matters. Stop texting, stop talking, slow down. Yield to pedestrians, obey traffic laws.
Stay off the phone too.
Unfortunately, in this town, you have the Latrobe slide instead of the Latrobe stop. I've noticed drivers in this town treat stop signs as a marginal suggestion. Occasionally you may obey, but not necessary. It's sort of like the manufacturer's recommended retail price. You can take it or not. It's probably going to be cheaper. So they see that stop sign as, I guess I coulda, shoulda, maybe, but not really. So they just keep drifting through it. They slide right through the stop sign. So shame on us, because probably we've all been guilty of driving too fast in a residential zone, not stopping completely the stop sign, and unfortunately for a lot of us, playing with our phones and other gadgets that we have in our cars.
Yeah. On that phone all the time.
Right now, just to give you an idea of how things are, I'm in budget times. This is the time of year where council prepares the budget. From January 1 to December is our fiscal year, just like most people's years. And we want to, in December, pass the budget. I can tell you, it's, as you might expect, a challenge. We're still a bit of a recessionary period. In fact, President Obama was the first president elected with an unemployment rate as high as it is nationally since Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected, I believe, in 1936 with a high unemployment rate as well. For us, what that means is, and I've already mentioned how small a city we have, we're not on the revenue side seeing the revenues grow. Many families have their revenues grows at times because of an annual raise, be it a contract and being in a union, or they took a new job and their income increased. You all are on what's called a fixed income, I imagine, and you may get a cost of living raise through a pension or through Social Security. Well, the city didn't get either when it comes to our real estate. In fact, our real estate rate will generate less taxes next year than it did this year. Okay? So we're actually getting a pay cut on real estate. Our earned income tax is projected to be slightly down, but it will be at best flat. No growth there. We're likely to get a little bit of decrease on the transfer station revenues. That's our garbage transfer station. But for the most part, revenues next year are going to be down 1%. So while most families are getting maybe a tiny 1% cost of living increase, and other families are getting a 1 or 2% raise, we're getting a 1% decrease. So my budget, obviously, on the expenditure side has to decrease as well. But unfortunately, there are factors within the expenditure side that are beyond my control. Some are like gasoline. You know, the cost may be increasing, and the cost of asphalt, and the cost of electricity, or whatever it is. They're fixed costs that seem to go up, and that's why your COLA, your cost of living increase, gets washed away, right? Because the cost of groceries and everything else just seems to increase a little bit above it. Okay? Well, it's the same for us. And there's also things that we have called contracts with our employees. And those aren't generous, I can guarantee you that. They have about a 2% or 3% raise for our police and our public works people. Nothing over 3%. Nobody in the city is getting an over 3% raise. So I've got to find a way to decrease expenditures by 1% to match my 1% decrease in revenue. But I've got to do it within the context of most of my driving factors of expenditures are increasing regardless of what I do, via contracts, which we've signed in the past, or via just dealing with the local gas station or the asphalt company. So the challenge is how to balance that budget, and we'll do that probably through a number of hard choices, which may include changes to personnel, possibly include what our contribution is, let's say, to the library or to Parks and Rec, or it will certainly include deferring some maintenance issues and some capital projects, like we talked about with sidewalks. It's an honor to be able to deal with the taxpayer's purse. It also is a great challenge to handle it wisely. There's a reason why it must be handled wisely, because it essentially is your money. But I can tell you this year, there'll be a lot of interesting agonizing over which area of the budget we cut to make the thing balance. Unlike Washington, we can't print money in Latrobe, and our ability to go into debt is greatly limited, partly because we entered into a good bill of debt with the parking garage. Hopefully you guys know by now that your parking pass price is decreased.
Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. That's great.
And hopefully you recognize that as residents, with that parking pass, if you choose, you can park if you wanted to in the garage. I know a couple of the folks here do actually do that. They want to get under the cover of the garage. What the city did, unfortunately, most of the press has been negative about raising the price of the parking ticket, which, remember, is for people who break the rules. A person who gets a parking ticket for at least a minute stole a parking space. You know, you could go into the store and say, I only have $2, can I have that milk that's $2.35? And if you walked out and gave them $2, they'd still say you were stealing, wouldn't they? They wouldn't ask, they wouldn't let you get that discount. No, they wouldn't. They would expect you to pay full price or don't leave with the product. In the same way as with parking, same is true. Most of the press has been negative about the parking ticket fine being $10. That actually now has gone away. The council's reduced it to $5. But what the press, or most people don't realize on the street, is for residents of this town who live in the downtown, their price for parking has gone down from $30 to $15. For residents of this town who live in the other parts of the town, they get a 30% discount on any pass that they buy. And for others, by parking in a remote lot, for us, which happens to be at the DeSalvo station, their prices went down also from $30 to $15. Now other prices did go up. A regular pass in the garage went from $30 to $40, and reserve passes, so forth, up to $50 and the like. But we did a different fee structure related to parking. The goal was to reward you all who are living here, because you shop here. Many of you shop at Dollar General, you eat at Valley Dairy, you patronize the businesses downtown, and we did not want to penalize you with a high pass. We want you to be here 24/7, which many of you are. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you're in downtown Latrobe. We wanted to make that cheapest for you as possible. Unfortunately, when this building was built, it didn't include its own parking lot, and so we managed the parking for you, but we tried to make it reasonable. And what we want to do is encourage other building owners who maybe can't provide parking for their residents to be able to say to the residents, you can rent here, and you'll have to buy a parking pass, but it'll be $15 a month, which is basically 50 cents a day to park 24 hours that day. Pretty good deal considering 50 cents might get you an hour on the meter. So those are part of the things we're doing to try to change the way things happen in this town. Pango's a controversial issue as well, and some of you guys may have heard about the pay-by-phone app. For those of you who have friends who are confused about Pango, they need to know that they're always allowed to pay the meters just as exactly as they always were before. They don't need a smartphone to park in Latrobe. You can put a nickel and a dime in those meters. That's all you need. If you have a smartphone and if you don't have any coins and you'd like to pay with the phone, we gave you another choice, a choice you never had before. Imagine a restaurant not having a credit card option. It's almost unheard of in today's era. Every restaurant you go into, Valley Dairy on up, you can swipe a card. Many of you never would ever think of doing that. You pay cash. But there's a lot of people who like that convenience. In the same way with parking. And instead of buying a bunch of new meter heads that had credit card swipers in them, we came up with another way that cost the city almost nothing to let people use their own phones to pay with their own credit cards. And it's just another convenience for the people of this town. The last thing that maybe doesn't relate to you specifically, but you're in this town, is the whole issue of the transfer station and garbage and some of those things. We're working at doing a new garbage contract, but there's been a lot of discussion about whether the residential and commercial garbage contract should be tied in with the city's transfer station. We're the only local government in Western Pennsylvania who operates a transfer station. There's one other local government, Sunbury, Pennsylvania, who has a transfer station. And what a transfer station is a place that you can take large items or other items that you're not allowed to throw out on the curb. They might be construction materials or something that you're not able to throw out on the curb. And drive it to our transfer station over the scales. We'll weigh it, and we'll weigh you after it's dumped, and we'll give you a bill for that service. We get customers from all over. The transfer station in 2000 grossed $1 million for this city. Gross, not net. Gross revenue of over $1 million. This year it will gross over $900,000. Next year we're projecting it to gross $700,000. And the reason it's stepping down a little bit is its historic averages were over $500,000. But when the storm came through in 2011 and all the hail damage was done, everybody in town got a new roof, it seemed like. And a lot of those roofs went out to the transfer station. A lot of the shingles went out that way. So our revenue is high, it's stepping down. But we believe because of word of mouth, it actually has more customers than it did several years ago. So we're hoping that revenues might stay at least constant at $700,000 and maybe hopefully grow. But we've also given thought, would there be an advantage to have an outside company operate the scales? And would there be an advantage for that company to be able to grow the business? Because they have more trucks, they have more capital behind them, they might be able to invest in equipment and generate more business. They might be able to do more advertising. But it's not so simple as that. There's a lot more to it. But in the idea of having a discussion, we've been doing that for several months, and there has been thought giving to tie it to the residential contract or to have it go alone. But the current thing is we're going to try to extend the current contract for another year. Actually, we're going to be bidding at. So theoretically, after January 1, we'll have another waste hauler in town. We might not. And then over the next year, 2013, we'll investigate the feasibility of having another outside vendor work and operate the transfer station. The transfer station has a state permit for the amount of tons that can go through it in any given day. And we don't use the entire permit. We may use like 40% of the allowable permit. The thinking is maybe a private entity could grow it to 100% and you maximize the value. But the city might be able to do that as well. So 2013, we'll not only discuss to outsource it, but we'll also discuss the idea of keeping it in-house and how do we grow it. The reason that's important is because back to our original discussion. Remember I talked about our income decreased by 1%? The only way to increase revenue for the government is to raise taxes, or to raise fees, or the fines that people pay for doing various business. That's true for just about every level of government except Washington, who can print more money. But this local government has a business. It's called the transfer station. We're the only one in Western Pennsylvania, one of only 2 in Pennsylvania that have that at the local level. It's a service that people in Ligonier, in Derry, in Unity, in Greensburg can take advantage of by, on a Saturday or a Tuesday afternoon, driving their waste to our site, and we take it to the landfill for them and give them a bill. So, in the future, I've got to find a way to grow revenues because I know my expenses aren't going to get cheaper. You know, in 5 years from now, my gas bill isn't going to be cheaper. My employees won't be any cheaper, right? So, the transfer station is very important. If I can grow the revenue of the transfer station and make it more efficient and get a better net of revenue over its expenses, the city will benefit. If I do that through the means of contracting it out to a private entity, or if I do that in-house, I must do that, or the alternative is to decrease services to match the dwindling resources of the tax base, or increase taxes. Those are the only alternatives. Decrease services, raise taxes, or grow the transfer station. This next period of time, a lot of energy will be given to that latter choice, how to grow the transfer station. If it grows, we get back to curb cuts. We get back to paving the roads. We get back to so many other things that have been deferred and can handle those. So I've covered a lot in that amount of time. Any other questions or thoughts?
Alex,
Yes.
is there any way that we can attract more businesses and industries into the area?
That's a great question. Globally, we're part of an economy that some would say is pretty flat globally. The products that we buy and use, whether they're manufactured here or assembled here, have components that come from all over the world, literally. In fact, some of the products that are made here in Latrobe Specialty still go very far to get put into a product that might come all the way back to get used here. And as you know, they're involved in the aerospace industry as well as Kennametal, which does specialty steel. And they also are involved in medical products and so forth. The good news for us, at least at that level, is we already have a job base. We melt steel in this town and make it into other kinds of metal products. We brew beer over here and sell it all over the eastern United States and even, I guess, to elsewhere. It goes pretty far. You may know that Castle Co-Packers is going to be moving into the Chestnut bottling facility, the old LaNature's facility. And hopefully by the year end 2013, the beginning of 2014, they'll have 120 jobs over there. They just had a hiring fair last week. And they'll be bottling products like Market District Tea that you buy at Giant Eagle and some other beverages which seem to be growing in popularity. So that's the good news. We do some manufacturing, but looking globally, the competition is so fierce for manufacturing jobs because they're the real drivers of anyone's economy. What I do, quite frankly, is very important, but I don't create wealth. I basically take wealth to service people. It's in the form of taxes, and I provide services. But I'm not creating a new product, which is really the generation of wealth, and that's why industry is so important. Globally, though, unfortunately, you know, manufacturers and the companies and the shareholders and the stockholders that own them are faced daily with challenges of how to be profitable when costs are increasing and competition is hitting them from all over the world. They may have a competitor who moved overseas, who's selling their product for 20% less than they did last year. How do you compete? Many of them find themselves chasing their competitors overseas to be competitive. So I can't control any of that. As a city, we need to be efficient, we need to keep our taxes low, and have a nice, well-maintained infrastructure. I think that's our role. We also need to be positive about what a great community this is. Unfortunately, so much time is wasted on the internet and in writing letters to the editor about what's wrong with our community, instead of telling people what's right with our community. If this is such a bad place, what makes you a bad person for having lived here all your life? Of course not. You love this place. You care more about this community than anyone else who doesn't live here. So why not talk about what a good place this is? So a lot of my job is, whether it's Rotary or talking to you, is trying to help people understand Latrobe is a good place. It's not only a good place, it's a great place. It's a safe place to raise a family. It's got wonderful 4 seasons that are beautiful, crisp fall air, wonderful cold winters, beautiful, wonderful, vibrant springs, and warm summers. They're certainly cold.
I don't like the cold.
We've got great affordable housing. We have safe streets. I know we've got problem places in town. Some properties that have drug issues or rental problems. But this is a very safe place. I still see kids walking up and down the street to go to the swimming pool, to go to the McFeely Rogers pool. You know, I mean, it's just great to see that. This is a community that people can really settle in on. It's very convenient to everything from large regional malls to gorgeous ski slopes to class 5 rapids.
Restaurants, too.
And restaurants. I mean, so you've got so many things. The cost of living is relatively affordable here in Western Pennsylvania. And that has a lot to do with not only our taxes, but the fact that, you know, our housing is affordable. I mean, many of you have family members who live in Atlanta, in Phoenix, in Washington, D.C., and what a house that costs $250,000 in Latrobe would be in those cities $750,000 up to $1 million. So what we got to do is together help people see that this is a great place to invest in and not be our own worst enemy. We're competing against states and nations. It's no longer us against Derry or Greensburg. It's us against Hong Kong and the suburbs of Hong Kong, the suburbs of Australia, China, of Europe, of Africa, of Central Asia. The economies, the emerging markets worldwide are who our competition is. So we need to think global, we need to think local, and we also need to think positive. And I'm amazed about the negative energies people spend on tearing apart their city, their leaders in their city, and the great community they have. I would love to appeal to those people and I'm appealing to you, to be a part of how we can make this a better place. Look, we're all on this planet for the glory of God and for the legacy of sense of bringing glory to Him behind us, with the thought that it's better for us having been here, right? Like the Boy Scouts, you know, they don't want to leave any trace, but they want to leave it better than what it was than when they got there. That's the mentality. My question to you, to each of you, is how are you leaving this city better than it was when you got here? You know, what did you do to contribute? Many of you, it's unbelievable. You've raised your family here. You've worked. You've contributed. You've served in church. You've made quilts. You've sent missionaries over. You did the PTA. I mean, I could go on and on. You were the den mothers. You were all those things. And still, many of you are so active. But do you realize that many of the people my age aren't engaged in anything but fantasy football leagues and blog chat rooms on the internet?
Right.
Are you kidding?
Twitter.
Yeah. I mean, they know more the ephemeral life of the internet with make-believe characters than they do their neighbor. Their neighbor could have fallen and been unable to get up for a week and they wouldn't even notice it. But they can tell you who caught a touchdown pass in the Chicago Bear-Tampa Bay game. I mean, are you kidding? What a waste of humanity. And I'm ashamed of many people my age who spend more time worried about the next Xbox, what's the latest
Video
thing?
game.
Yeah, the latest video game, Black Ops or whatever it's called. Shoot to Kill. I can't remember what the name is. Something like that. Yeah, Shoot to Kill maybe. I don't know. But anyways, that's what they're concerned with. Many people my age, you know, the great generation of World War II, fought a war, raised a family, and built a country. Some of my generation has fought in wars, but most of them have not done that family thing. Don't got time for that, too busy, got to get to the gym. Some of them, when they did get around to marrying, don't see the need to have the kids, because, you know, they sure take up a whole lot of time. And, you know, they're so expensive anyways, who needs them? I mean, really. And they're not volunteering for the fire company, and they're not volunteering for the, you know, even the veterans. You know, you talk to the veterans, there's no new veterans coming in to replace them. They're not in Rotary. and they're not active in
They're
church.
all self-centered.
They're not active, again, they're not active in church. So the paradigm has got to shift. Again, back to the appeals. As the people who are here for a reason, God has not taken you home yet. God has not taken me home yet. That must mean I have a reason to be here. A reason that's more important than myself. And the reason you're here is to help people see that they got to be a part of a solution, part of the potential in the future, and not a contributor to the problem. We have so much untapped potential in this town. There's so many talented, creative people that if only they would volunteer and give back and give to their community, we could take us to a whole higher level.
Such as Faith in Action. A lot of people here have volunteers for Faith in Action. And we really help a lot of people right in this area.
Yeah.
The
This
office is in
community
Latrobe.
not only has an unbelievable industrial legacy, Kennemental and Latrobe and Standard Steel and the different foundries, all that are around here, but Adelphi, a vision to help people, young people, kids who are troubled, that nobody else wanted, that 40 years ago was just an idea, but now is a multi-million-dollar organization helping people and young people all over, helping families stay intact by helping young people get on the right track. Faith in Action, an idea that the body of Christ isn't big enough in one little church building to make a difference, but the faith and action of all of the little bodies and all the little church buildings working together to meet the needs of shut-ins and so forth. But there's much more that we can do, and it's so amazing that we have that legacy and that we can build on it. I guess, I think it's still true this year, there was a program in the past that shovels snow for people who couldn't shovel snow. And it's unfortunate that it seems over the last few years has not been as active. There's so many needs that our neighbors have. People just simply need to look across the porch or to the neighbor to the left, to the neighbor to the right, and they'll see plenty of need. And you know what? No one's going to know about it. I mean, other than the neighbors, it's not going to be popular. It's not going to get headlines. It won't get you recognized anywhere. But I'm telling you, for your neighbor, that's going to matter a big deal.
Well, even
They'll
the
know.
kids don't offer to do the snow.
Even for $5.
No, they won't.
You ought to give them shoot 'em up Black Ops and they'll get into it. Make a video game out of shoveling. I don't know.
I don't know how much that would get.
Yeah, and not only, I make mention so many more. Faith in Action, the Salvation Army here, the volunteer fire companies here. I mean, do you realize the volunteer company saves us about $1 million of taxpayer dollars that we don't have to spend because these guys volunteer? This past week, when we had the big storms a couple weeks ago, they worked 24 hours, 26 hours straight.
They're all volunteers, I know that.
They got a cup of coffee,
Yeah.
but they didn't get anything else. They got a couple thank yous. They didn't get paid, but they risked their bodies and their lives and their time to go help other people out. So, we never want to be so negative about what is already so good here. What we've got to do is for the people who are on the sidelines, call them to get into the game and live life to the fullest by being a participant in reality and not on the internet or wherever they're doing their life.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, I've taken a lot of your time, and you guys have been very generous.
Yeah.
Are there other questions before we wrap up?
Yeah, I was gonna say, since you live in Greensburg, do you know Tadero?
No, I don't.
He's a mayor of South Greensburg.
No, I don't. I'll have to look him up.
Yeah.
Is there ever a chance we could get a small grocery store in town?
That's a wonderful question.
And I would even volunteer to work there so that we would have one.
Yeah, it's so unfortunate how the model of grocery stores have gone to just supersizing. But we're seeing a bit of a trend of even Giant Eagle building smaller stores. And you'll see this like the dollar cents or the dollar bottom.
Yes.
Some of those are smaller stores. But it took so many years for them to get up to the 100,000 square feet to kind of go backwards. And in the near future, unfortunately, and I'm not picking on Dollar General, that's what you'll have. And the selections and really the cost. It may be $1 or less or around $1, but you all know the sizes are so small that it doesn't compare to what you can get at Shop and Save or Giant Eagle for a similar product, let alone the lack of fresh produce, meats, and vegetables.
Right.
So, it's sort of a chicken and egg thing. And that's why I talked about parking, because the residential will drive the retail.
Oh, boy.
And it used to be that people lived above all these shops.
Yeah.
Many of them were the store owner, but many of these storefronts are empty above them. And we've got to find a way to get a little bit of more heads in the beds in residential living in the downtown. Because like the chicken and the egg, which comes first, the grocery store or the people? In this scenario, it's probably going to be the people. If some people, and enough critical mass of people are living in the downtown, it will entice a grocery store proprietor to open up a small store here and make a go of it. But if there's not enough heads in beds and not enough critical mass, unfortunately they won't, which again doesn't help us wanting to live here. So that's the chicken and egg. It's a catch-22. As far as the city manager is, it's not really my job to actively attract a grocery store, but we work with the Latrobe Community Revitalization Program and the Main Street program in this town, who's part of their job to try to work in attracting those. My job is to try to protect people and property and keep the cost of doing that low and do that well. Their job is to try to, again, look at attracting businesses that aren't here to make the downtown a better place to live. But boy, we got to figure out how to do that.
22.
Yeah, it sure is. And so many downtowns, whether it's Youngwood, Southwest Greensburg, South Greensburg, Greensburg, Ligonier. I mean, just so many of them struggle with the similar issues. They might have a grocery store, it might be on the edge, or it might be really well located. Unfortunately, it's an automobile culture, and the massing of things and the supersizing of the stores is what's driving, no pun intended, the economy.
But I could see Latrobe being like Ligonier, where they have all the little shops, and they have a Johnny go in town and whatnot, and they get a lot of revenue that way. And I noticed there are little shops.
Yeah, they do, but they're also 9 miles away from the nearest Walmart. They don't have to compete with.
Walmart.
They don't have to compete with the Route 30. Route 30 in the plazas, as many of you know, is 1960s. The first plaza, the GBs and all that was built out near where Chick-fil-A is today, Taco Bell. That plaza was one of the first to be built in the region, and we've been competing with them ever since. And quite frankly, in the automobile culture we have, we've been losing, and the retail supersized. But the interesting thing is with the internet and people doing so many sales, Cyber Monday may beat Black Friday as the largest retail day of the year this year. And UPS and FedEx, those guys are delivering more things into people's houses than ever before. So you know what? I don't know if that's a sustainable model. A 2 million square foot mall or a 100,000 square foot big box. And people want and long for the authentic. They're interested in the local. They like the art center. And please, if you haven't been over to the art center, this Thursday, whatever, November 16th, they're going to have a wonderful they have a children art competition. I was a judge within it. You won't believe what these kids have done. They're going to have an art show. But you can eat there.
Kids are good in art.
You can buy stuff there, and people long for that authentic. They're tired of the cookie cutter McDonaldization of America.
Yes.
And they want a small town like this. In fact, many parts of the United States are building new developments to look like towns. Celebration is a town built by Disney, of all people, down in Florida, to create and recreate Main Street that we already have here in Latrobe. Because they realize many people are not interested in the big box feel, the dehumanization of suburbia and sprawl. They're looking for the downtown. So hopefully we can be attractive to those, and more heads and beds will drive the registers and the retail traffic. So.
How would you propose that we get more people to reside in Latrobe? We have so many buildings that are vacant.
That's a great question.
Just deteriorating.
Just as I said, people like the authenticity of an old house. They like new wiring and windows that are sealed. So what am I saying? Unfortunately, many of our building and the housing stock product of the town has been neglected and not kept up. People have a hard enough time paying their property taxes, keeping up with their regular maintenance, and all that goes into home ownership. And the long-term maintenance things, just like I talked about my sidewalks and curb cuts, is the same thing for the property owners of this town. Most of the housing stock of this town was built before 1960, 1950. And unfortunately, before a time when wiring and insulation and building materials were kind of what they are today. Don't get me wrong, some of the brick houses built in this town are better than anything being built today. But the plumbing and the wiring and some of those other things are lacking. And they haven't been maintained, maybe some of them for decades. The hope is that younger families who maybe can't afford the new construction that is offered in the townships will find these homes and like homesteading, will spend 20, 30 years investing and building the properties up. And they'll be affordable to them, whereas the ones out there won't be. And that's our hope, you know, that a lot of people come in. And then another thing will happen, some properties need to go away. Some lots and some houses on those lots are too small to be marketable. They have 2 bedrooms. That maybe isn't appealing to people. You know, they might want their in-laws to stay over, so they need an extra bedroom. So, you know, the house that's too small on a too small lot may need to go away, and the neighbor might need to buy it so that they have a bigger lot, and they might be able to add on to their house. You know, add a family room, add a guest room, or something. Improving that property. So in a town like this that used to have 12,000 people, and let's say 6,000 houses, it may need to have 6,500 people and 3,000 houses. But those houses are better located, bigger, better lots, more elbow room. You know, less people are interested in having their neighbor share a wall with them.
Yeah.
Okay, as you guys are knowing that here. Okay, so it's almost like a rebirth within a community. The organic nature of a town like ours is that as the prices drop, because demand drops, then other parts of the market come in because price points are good, invest in those properties, and then gets them up so that they're marketable. And that's a long-term strategy. That's a trajectory where a neighborhood that maybe had 50 houses might in the future have 35 or 40. But those houses are a lot better than the 50 that were there before, you know, and they're stronger homes going forward. But that's a complicated thing and over time.
Elderly, and that may be why a lot of people don't want to come and locate here.
Okay, so the nature of your question is, at least demographically, what's the ratio? The ratio is very much elderly. We have one of the highest percentages of elderly in Westmoreland County than anywhere in the United States. And I don't mean to just always give depressing statistics, but this is probably one of the most depressing statistics that you'll ever hear. Since 1996, Westmoreland County has had more deaths annually than births. Nobody else other than Allegheny County and a few counties in Florida that are retirement communities can boast the same statistic. That's a startling statistic. When we shed 120,000 manufacturing jobs from southwestern Pennsylvania, became the United States' #1 exporter of young people and families. And the legacy of that is a higher than national averages and higher than state averages elderly. The city of Latrobe is about 25% over 65. We're less than, 14% under 15. Now, when we talk about the world being flat, recognize that Syria has 30% of its population under 15 years old. 15 years old or younger, 30% of that country's population is that young. The world, in many parts, is 25, 35, even 50% of their population under 15. Some parts of the United States are that way. Some parts of the growing states of Arizona and Texas and California and Georgia and North and South Carolina have 20 to 30% of their population under 15, where we have about 12 or 14% under 15. So you're right. It goes back to, I hate to preach so much about demographic trends. People aren't interested in 5 kids or big families. Most of us have more TVs and bathrooms than we do children. Some of us have more registered vehicles than we do drivers.
That's right.
The insanity of the American dream has been turned on its head. And what it is quite frankly, is a bit self-centered and not looking out to the future. Japan, Italy, and many European countries have a lower birth rate, so low that it's less than replacement. It's about 1.9 and 1.8. America is over 2.1, which is what you need. And you got a mom and a dad, you need 2.1 children. Now, when you can figure out how to have a 0.10 of a child, you let me know. But statistically, you need 2.1 children out of every couple, to replace the population and maybe just keep it steady state. In Italy, it's about 1.8, 1.9. And I say that to say that those populations are shrinking. The only reason, though, we're not shrinking in the total in America, quite frankly, is through immigration. We're the only industrialized nation that is growing. We're the only industrialized nation that is growing because we're one of the few places that people want to move to. We're one of the only few places that people want to move to. That's why we have an immigration problem. But if it wasn't for immigration, we wouldn't have growth. But what we have with the immigration, which I believe is a good thing, is the diversity that is leading to the browning of America. And one of the challenges we have here in the city of Latrobe is we are a monoculture. We're homogeneous, if you will, in our skin and ethnicity. Many of you travel and you go to other cities and you recognize right away the Hispanic population that's there. The only reason other parts of the country are growing is because they have become attractive to immigrants. Immigrants move to the jobs. Back to chicken and eggs. The jobs attract immigrants. They, just like our great-grandparents, were all immigrants, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, some of us were 100, 200 years ago, some of us it was 50 years
My
ago.
parents were immigrants.
Exactly. So, but unfortunately in southwestern Pennsylvania, we're one of the few places in the United States that has not attracted significant populations of immigrants. In Minnesota, the Somalis that have moved to Minneapolis are incredible. The Ethiopians who have moved to Tennessee, it's amazing. The Latinos that have moved in so many of the states. It's called the browning of America. President Obama won this election primarily through immigration. And the reality for Western Pennsylvania, which certainly did not vote for Obama, and I'm not talking political here, I'm just talking demographics, is we have not been a very attractive place for the last 50 years for the immigrant populations of this country. And we must be open-armed to the diversity. If you want to come to this country, you want to live in the greatest country on the planet, you're welcome. And this is a great place to do it. Maybe that's part of our message for growing the economy, to get a grocery store, is to put a sign up, you know, at the Mexican border. I know that's scary. Hey, did you ever think of Latrobe? Maybe you could catch a plane ride off of Spirit Airlines.
Yeah.
You know, maybe we can move the Statue of Liberty here and say, give us your tired, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, and encourage them to come here. Whatever we got to do, it's got to be part of the paradigm. Because America isn't getting any younger, and where it is getting any younger, it's growing. Where it's growing through immigration. It's the browning of America. No longer will European whites be the majority of over 50%. We will be a minority majority, if you will. That is, we will represent less than 50% of the population, but we'll still be the largest people group. So that's a radical change. And you don't see it here. Many of you know this. When you go eat dinner in Washington, D.C., you might not have a wait staff who can speak English as their first language. The person cleaning the hotel room you stayed at is likely not to speak English.
Yeah, I know that.
That's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Your great-grandparents didn't either. My great-grandparents didn't either. They had to learn, and they did, but they risked life and limb to come to this country, to give us a place that we could call home.
Yeah.
I don't know Italy. I never lived there. Someone did, and they risked everything to get here so I could be here. I mean, that's the American dream. So the American dream isn't about fantasy football, delaying marriage, small families, no kids, right? Double income, no kids. It should be about how we're making a better place for those who come after me so that they benefit from our hard work.
Well, I find that a lot of the people that are elderly have come from other countries, or else their ancestors did, but yet they're not willing to accept
Isn't it ironic, the human
anybody
nature?
else.
Yeah, the human nature of us all is, you know, we'll be like the last ones in, you know. The history is plagued in the United States with this immigrant group beating up that immigrant group because, you know, they're the next ones in. You know, as the Italians and the Irish and the blacks and so forth, and, you know, race riots. I mean, you look at the different cultures, you know, they fought over in Europe, they come over here and fight, but then after a few generations they forget, but then they're the ones who are usually quick to shut the door for the next group.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know it's a political issue, but, you know, it's insane. There are over 10 to 20 million Americans who are born in this country, but can't get a driver's license because they can't prove their citizenship. Their moms and their dads were illegal aliens. But they weren't born in Guatemala. They weren't born in Mexico. They were born here.
Are they Americans if they're born here?
You would think that, but they've been in hiding because their parents don't want to get deported back. And what happens when mom and dad get deported? How do you take kids who are 7 or 8, were born here, and their mom and dad have broken the law, or illegal aliens? I mean, the insanity of of immigration is just amazing in this country. I mean, most immigration happened before there were immigration laws.
Yeah.
In fact, the wave of Italians that my family called the wave that they brought in 1909, it was those high watermark years of immigration that led to the 1920s backlash against immigrants. They didn't like the idea that so many Catholic Southern Europeans were moving here. The KKK was very active in Western Pennsylvania because of the Catholic Southern Europeans were not welcomed here. And many of you know this.
I know that. I was called a hunky every time I went to school.
And that led to laws in Washington that put a gate up for the first time. Now the Chinese were blocked in the middle of the 19th century, but it put a gate up at the federal government that said, you know, but before that nobody checked the papers of the Puritans, for crying out loud. The Indians wish they could, you know.
Yeah.
So when we celebrate Thanksgiving next week, realize that from 1620 until 1920, immigration came without law. There was wicket gates. Don't get me wrong. We did think of some of those issues. We weren't willing to take prisoners and sick people, so they got shipped away at Ellis Island. Unfortunately, pretty scary, huh?
Yeah.
But there weren't quotas like what we have now, or these crazy things where we make a guy who wants to support his family, who in Mexico makes $20 a week or a month, who desperately wants to feed his kids and give his kids a better future, a criminal for traveling 200 miles to get a job.
Yeah.
You would call that gumption, right?
That's right.
You would call that motivation and good thinking if it was moving from Latrobe to Harrisburg to get a job. But if it's from Mexico City to San Antonio, Texas, he's a villain. And I would say that's insane. Who came up with that idea?
Yeah.
You know, we welcome that. And our reluctance to accept change and people who are different from us is not conducive for the future, because the world is flat. And the reality is that many of us will be doing business, whether we like it or not. Go to Kennemetal. The CEO of Kennemetal, I think, is not from this country. You know, I mean, really. You have to do business worldwide. You've got to be able to speak languages and understand cultures and embrace them. Because if you won't be able to sell your goods to them, which is so essential to get to growing markets. So it's a great question. I feel like I'm running for office.
We vote for you.
Yeah,
Come back
I
for
just thought we were going to talk about city manager stuff, but I left with you the map of the city that we just produced this past year. Hopefully you find it informative. I apologize if the type is too small, but you can also look at it in your computer and make it bigger. But I'm available at any time. I work essentially for you. I answer to a city council, but my paycheck comes from your money, and I don't take that for granted. So, you know, don't ever apologize, therefore, for saying to me, I don't like this, like we need railing back here, or you need to fix that. I'm a big boy, I can handle it. Don't be surprised if my answer, though, is at times, it's in the list, we'll get to it, not now, or whatever. You know, if we can agree to do that, if you don't expect me to get it done by tomorrow.
You're like the dad telling the kid to wait.
Yeah, I feel like often like a parent, you know, because, you know, you don't always have it all. Can't make it happen.
Did you ever
You're an
look at the
excellent
Lions?
A bit. I've spoken at Lions groups and that. But again, there's another charitable organization, Brotherhood, who helps out.
Yeah.
That's good.
Emily, you've been wonderful for inviting me. About 2 months ago we started talking about today.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate it.
Marcy wants to ask you a question. We appreciate you. You're an excellent speaker.
Well, thank you.
I enjoyed you very much.
Well, you're too kind. Very, very kind.
Yes.